Okay guys, welcome to part 2 here. Now I've got the auto trader loaded up on a footprint chart. I'm working with a 12 range on the March 23 of the ES. I should note here I'm recording this on Saturday the 17th, 1 week out from when I recorded part 1, where we went through the parameters. And as I typically do here, I've got our toolbar on here. I've got our initial balance. Oh, I've got a 21 McGinley in the middle of this, and then of course the footprint indicator is on. Now, a couple things to note here. One, the auto trader does not require our footprint chart. You could run it on any footprint chart as long as it can identify some of these delta events. So it's a separate standalone product that you can apply to your own footprint chart or whatever you may be using. You could be using the Ninja footprint chart. You're not going to have all of the horsepower and the sophistication that comes with the way that the two of these work together, but understand it's a separate product. So that said, let's show it in application here. Same as I had it set when we went through the parameters. Nothing has changed other than I now have loaded the auto trader. Now, a couple things to note here. When it first loads, you want to have it paused. You don't necessarily want it, for example, you don't want to bring it over. I'm just showing you can enable it here right in your strategy. So when you enable it, you don't want this to be loaded necessarily. So that just some preparation so that you don't enable it immediately. You may or may not want that to be taking a trade if a trade was qualified based on how you have this set. We're going to go through some of this, but let's just look at it here, because the idea here is that we're just looking at the market here. We've had a little swing up here. We didn't quite get to the IB, a retrace, and what appears to be signs of strength here. Now we're going to go through why it's going to trade here, but let me just start here. And of course I've just gone back to Monday. This is 10:51. Obviously I'm using the playback here, so let's put it at twice here. So I'm looking for a long here. So as it sits right now, there's a little evidence here, and you'll see I've got a notation here that we have some volume. We have some volume sequencing here. So you see we go from 0 to 41 to 340 to 399 to 610. So we have signs of strength coming here. We mark these within our footprint indicator when you see that kind of volume sequencing up and down. And these are all some of the nuances that are part of our footprint chart and why these two work so well together. But let's just fire it up here and see what we can get here. So boom, there's a big delta surge here as you see here. Now let's arm it. Well, let's turn it on here. Let's arm it. Now any of these signals that happen here, it's going to take the trade for us. Same as we have set it up in the initial video. I'm working with a 3-lot. First two are scalps that have a target of 5 ticks, and then I'm leaving a runner. I typically have that at 16, but I'll move it based on if I see any resistance or targets or something that would be obvious, as is the case with any runner like that. You can manually affect it and move it on the chart. Now let's see if we can get something to fire here. Let's turn this. We'll go to 4 here. More volume sequencing. So you might be watching here. This is just the kind of thing saying, okay, this looks good to me. I've got a few things that I'd be identified that I'd be looking for here. I see this volume sequencing. Note I have the volume sequencing active over here. So any volume sequencing within these 2 bars potentially can trigger an entry for us. So let's see if we can get one here. Starting to look better. Now here's a little bit of heat on there. So market, let's speed this up here when we get to 6 here. Eventually we'll get something to fire here. So there we see some more potential strength. So we see this volume sequencing starting to come 2 bars in a row. So there's the trade. So we're in the trade. We got 5-tick target here. Here's our 16-tick runner here. So the first 2 are taken here. Now I have this set, as you'll recall in the setup video. This has got a chandelier stop, so 1.5 times the initial risk. This will move to break even. I could automatically, I could just do it with the press of this button, move it to break even. Let's just let it run here and see if we can get the push. Now this might be questionable. The opening range high may be a natural target, right? It's the kind of thing an algorithm would use. Let's see if we can get all the way pushed up here to the initial balance. So now we're running it here. I'm just going to let the auto trader's ATM take over rather than interact with it here, even though just know that you could do that. So there we get a decent looking run. So still hanging here with our initial stop. Back to the 21 McGinley. Looks like you see there's more sequencing here. This looks like We've got some aggression here. Delta staying positive here. Still going after that big push to try and get to the initial balance. Let's see if we can get there. No, here, so we've got trap traders down here. You see these guys here. Look, this is the shorts going here. They're trapped here, so we've identified that. So that's delta reversal here. Still not yet to the IB, but I can see that this would be an area to perhaps be aggressive because these guys have got to cover. Now we get more volume sequencing here, and boom. Okay, so let's stop it there. So we get a pretty good run there. Now note a couple of things happen there. So this is an interesting sequence here. So you can see that why we fired here. So as I have it set here, we had delta reversal and I also had volume sequencing. So because that's happening here, the auto trader is identifying that and then acting accordingly as I have it enabled for longs only. So as we go through this sequence here, it starts to trigger based on the volume sequencing. So as I have it set, volume sequencing within any two bars here as we were first viewing it. So that's the trigger. So the sequencing triggers the initial entry, which you saw hit the initial scalp targets and then the runner. But what happened here as I was going to pause it, we had additional signals here firing. So it closed one and then went into the next because the conditions were there. So we have down here, you see it with the stripe, a delta surge is firing here, which is why the second trade went off as it was breaking the initial balance. And we see here we have a touch no fill actually. Oh, is there anything more annoying? But we go up here, we touch it, we don't get filled there, so we're still in the trade, still have a 13 tick stop off of this, and the entries are based off of the sequencing of what we see here in the volume print. In the volume footprint. So you see all this sequencing here. So we see it here, we see it here, we see it here. Here's trap traders, right? There's an effort to push them down here. Bears get trapped here, they've got to cover. That may be part of this volume sequencing. So it's just very, very bullish here as we're pushing forward. Let's see if we can. Can't remember here if we get this filled here. Let's see if we can get this. May or may not. I mean, it's probably a good example to see how that might relate. So there's the scalps getting target. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so now note here what happened. Because it's still armed, I still have conditions here that are supporting this move. So this is we've had 3 trades in a row here, all hitting targets. Now as we hit this last one here, why is it firing? Because I have a delta surge here. Note over here. So a delta surge is so after we had the sequencing, which triggered, then we had trap traders, that triggered, that's the delta reversal. Then we have additional sequencing, and then we have a delta surge here, which is marked by this X and the stripe. So you're not going to miss anything, and that's the whole advantage because it can identify this faster than you and I can process. Okay, what's happening here? We've got a surge. Oh, we've got trap traders. Time to trade. Right, the market's already gone by the time we're processing what's happened here. But the auto trader is going to grab that, identify it, and have you in the market immediately. Now you want to be careful about too many trades in a row here because at some point you're going to hit exhaustion. So you may, if you were in that trade, you may turn it off so it's not going to go again. Right? It's a function of how aggressive you want to be, what you see. Perhaps you're referencing your footprint chart with a 5-minute or a 15-minute looking for potential resistance points up here, supply zones, anything that might cause the market to fail. But as we sit right now, this is a pretty good rip. We identified it down here. This was the first initial push where we saw the evidence of buyers taking control here. And then the big push here, this is what they have to do to break the initial balance. So they break it with all of that volume, thus the delta surge. All right, let's see. Oh, we're looking pretty aggressive here. So let's go ahead and just let that play out. See if we get that scalp target hit.
Order filled.
Scalps go. So I've got one last runner here. So we've taken this entire move here. Let's go ahead and just let that play out. See if we get that here. Note the golden zones up here. Might be a little bit of resistance. See if we can get that runner. Some more volume sequencing here. So this has been quite an aggressive run here. Still paused here. So there's no new trade teed up to go here. Just looking to see if this runner can get to its target. Pretty nice move here. Oh, let's see. Delta's dropping a little bit here. No reason to be getting out of the trade just yet. Looks like we might get it. A lot of golden zones up here, so I know there's going to be algo activity here. Let's go ahead and just close it ourselves. Okay, so when I close it, now I've disabled here. So pretty nice run that we got there. What did we get out of that? We got So if you're taking that in 3 lots, we ended up with 962 less fees here. So in our little playback here, so pretty nice run off of those 3 here. And then now you see as we get up here, we start to see signs of weakness as we've come into the where we know there's going to be algorithm activity here at those golden zones here, and note the big delta divergence here. So you see it marked by this stripe, by the big red dot up here, as well as the D down here for divergence. So does that mean you might want to take a short? Well, not necessarily here. That's a pretty good rip. But you might. So this is where your engagement with it. So you're watching what's happening in the market. You're identifying, just as if you were trading a footprint chart without the auto trader. The advantage here is if I see something setting up, I could be long or short, either one, depending on what I want, or I could have this on, and then am I going to go long or short based on what I see? So for example, I could go short here because I'm seeing potentially I've got this divergence here, here, so I've got some volume sequencing again. So there, now it's firing the short here. See if we can get that to hit. Again, right? Just based off of the evidence that we see here. Now, can we get back inside the initial balance here? I may want to move that here. I might like that a little bit closer down here because I know that's going to be support if we can even get this here. We'll let that run here and see if we get it. It looks like that one's going to get stopped out. I don't remember, to tell you the truth. Oh, so there it looks.
Order submitted.
Okay, so out it goes, and then because I have conditions here and I've left it running for a short, now I get another short based off of the sequencing of events that I see here. So we'll let that play as well. All right, so we had because of what's enabled down here, we took that short here. I'm going to turn it off here so we don't take another one. But you've got to be mindful of that when it's live money here. Do you want it engaged so that it can, if it sees something else as you're getting out of one trade, do you want it taking another trade? In this case, perhaps not. See, we'll let this play here. I can't remember what happens here. Maybe we can get our scalps. We'll go up to 8 here. Resistance up here, we can see that. Now, at any moment in time, of course, you can always close it, get out of it, recognize that. But we'll just let it play here and see what we get. Go a little bit. There we go. That's 8 times. I should get some either a stop or we're going to hit targets here pretty quickly. Oh, we'll let this run. And so there's, look at that. So interesting. So that's rare, right? Get a tick from your stop and not get it. So then we get some delta divergence here. Is that going to bring us down enough to where we can get this? So you see here, you're kind of watching, managing here, but you're letting this do the sequencing for you here. So now I've got delta divergence here. Looks like I've got some imbalance coming back down. So now we've got that hit. That's rare. I think we can all appreciate that happens rarely. Does it get a tick from your stop and then reverse? But in this case, we did. Okay, so let's stop it right there. So pretty nice sequence of events here. One stop. So I think we had 4 trades, 3 winners, 1 loser. So we end up there with the auto trader. We come out at 806 after fees on that. So not a bad sequence here. Probably one more trade than we wanted, but I think it's valuable to show you that if it identifies the conditions that you have enabled, it will just keep taking trades. So you got to be mindful of whether or not you want it armed while you're in a trade. Often, if I'm in one trade, I'll pause it to be sure that I want another trade. And then you're kind of over here, finger on the mouse, saying, okay, do I like what I see here with this? Potentially, right? So I see delta divergence, then I got an O, I know that that's a delta drop. That short ended up working out, but I could have been in that condition here where I turn it on, I go, okay, shorts only, this is what I want to see. I have the capability here of deciding whether I want all of these conditions or just a few or just one of these conditions. So you've got a lot of capability with regard to how you interact with it, what you enable, what it's identifying, and then it's just a process of turning it on, turning it off, going to break even, hitting targets, close. Right, a lot of flexibility, but ultimately you're going to have to work with this and trial it and work with it in sim because it's so powerful, right? So you've got to be careful of this over trading. So you've got to use it when you identify that location. So something like this is just ideal, where we come up here, we're at the highs of the day, we've got some likely algorithmic activity here as we've got a series of golden zones. Would this be an area, and you might be looking at a 5-minute, as I said before, 5-minute or 15-minute, we've got a supply zone up here. Some reason that you would be cautious about this continuing to move higher. There's a you call it profit taking, but we see now sequencing coming down. We see imbalances on the way. We've got some identification here of weakness. So thus the short plays out pretty nicely. So if I were looking at this now, my view here, and again, I don't remember what happens, but my thought with here I've got a key location here. I'm coming back to the 21 McGinley. I'm back to the IB high. We know bulls are going to want to try and keep it outside of the IB. If we stay outside of the initial balance, the potential to attract the higher time frame traders here who can really turn this into a trending day. So all of those things are at play here, but rather than trying to decipher what's happening here, we're not going to miss any setups here because of the horsepower of the auto trader. It's going to identify it, make the trade for us so we don't miss it. So it's ultimately a function of what do I want to have active here, and you'll develop a fluidity with these as you understand. So things that you'll often want to be looking for, volume sequencing. You can see here we identified in the footprint chart all of the volume sequencing both up and down. So that's important. Things stacked imbalances, of course, that would be the kind of thing that you'd want to look for in a continuation of a trend. So keeping that active here might be something that you're focused on. You may develop a particular expertise with some of these delta signals that become your go-to setups, and then it's just a matter of turning it on. Am I long or short? I've got everything set here that I want. Okay, well, let's just see what we get here. Let's do one more.
Order submitted.
So there we go with the next trade. Right? So do you see now immediately it's taking it because of what I have enabled here. So the second I turn the playback on in real time here, this is taking this based on the sequence of events here. Because I have it set in the last two, I've had a delta divergence and then a delta drop. So you can see this identified both by the stripe, both by the markings, the little graphics that we put on the footprint chart, and of course that's unique to ours. But the auto trader could identify that on any footprint chart. He's just going to have, I think, additional benefit working with ours. So as that's coming down here, so here's my 13-tick stop, here's my 5-tick target, my scalp target, and then here's my runner target, which I can move based on what I see here in the market. I may want to come down here to this exhaustion print here. Maybe I think I can get all the way down to 39.78. I can do all this. Maybe I want to move it down here and get a little bit more out of that runner. Of course, looking at this here, I don't know that I'd want to be continuing to look for shorts here. So if I was in this, I might disable that because I know this is going to be natural support. I may or may not get that break. Well, let's just go ahead and let it play and see what we get there. See, I would like to get at least the scalps out so that I know that let's see, well, we'll see what happens. I honestly don't remember. That's why I went back to Monday, because we all remember what happened Thursday and Friday. The market was a bit crazy here. So let's go back here and see this now. So I've got volume sequencing here, right? Do I want to be short? Do I want to be long? Do I want to close this? I could do this. I could turn this around. I could go back to long and say, okay, if I'm going to get stopped out here, I want this to turn and go long. Or I might think, oh, okay, well, if I get stopped out here, potentially I've got a lower high. I want to stay short. So now the only thing it can do is buy, because I have only longs enabled. I don't recall what happens here, but you see that natural support here. It came right back down to the 21 McGinley, a couple of ticks off the IB high, which I knew was going to, well, I shouldn't say that, which is potentially support here, right? As bulls are going to want to keep it out. I don't remember what happens here. Let's see if we get this. Let's take it up to 10. We'll get out of the trade. I've got longs enabled, so if I take that here now, looking at the golden zones here, do I want to be long here? I'd be questionable here. I wouldn't want to be longing right into that golden zone personally, right? Now, I see the sequencing. Doesn't mean it can't break, but I'd be uncomfortable myself teeing this up in this sequence here, longing right into that golden zone. Oh, come on here. We'll just see if we can get this trade to finish up. Now, note the volume sequencing here. This is identifying it, so it looks like we're going to go here. So now I've got more
Order,
bullish
order
bias. Now,
submitted.
okay, so good. So now let's turn this off. Let's turn this off. So right now, look, right into that golden zone. That's why I would have been myself. I would have been uncomfortable there. We'll see if we can get the trade to fly, though. Just because it's there doesn't mean it can't break. See if they can get it to break. Note here we go one tick beyond it. You got to be mindful of those. There's POC at the upper end of the range here, more volume stacking. Looks like we got a little imbalance here. Now, of course, I'm running it 10 times here, so this is just for the demonstration's sake, but you can kind of see how this would play here. Do I want to be long here? All right, so, I can't remember what happens here. This is a good example here of why you don't want to long right into golden zones, and what the advantage of having an auto trader, or pardon me, the auto fibs right there, so I can see where that potential resistance is. I can see it all up here. I can see all the support down here. Advantages of working with this.
Order filled.
All right, so there's the scalp is out. Runner has not moved yet. I have this on the chandelier stop, so at 1.5 times the range, it will go to break even. If I don't choose to go break even sooner here, I could do it manually. Could move the target, but let's just keep it up here and see if we can get that. Nice volume sequencing. I see the 21 McGinley starting to lean higher here. I've got more resistance here I've got to get through, so I've got more golden zones here. Let's see if we can get that. As we're running now, fairly big negative delta starting to show up here intra-bar. Doesn't mean that it'll stay that way, but that's an example of how things can change intra-bar. Oh, let's go up here and we'll get that, and let's go ahead and close it. Okay, so I'm going to close that. Now notice when I close it manually, and I'm doing that here, let's go ahead and stop it. I'm doing that because of the stack of golden zones right here. Pretty good sequence on those 3 lots. What did we come out here with? So we had the one big loser, so now we're sitting back at 512 on the day here, and the market continues to rally. So the loser was when we longed here. The second one as we came down here, but then it rearmed and went again. So there's a pretty good example here. I don't want to show you just winners. I want to show you reality. So nice run up here. Too much, right? It probably fired one too many here, and that's just a good example so that you see, oh, wait a second. Now, do I want this enabled? And we're running at 6, 7, 8 times speed, so there'd be a little bit more time for you to decide whether you want it to stay active going from one trade to the next. But I think here a decent sequence so you can see how it's working and what's triggering it. So very tactile. It's very much we call it an auto trader, but I really think of it as a footprint trading assistant to help you identify things that you may not be able to process as quickly, obviously, as a piece of software here. So again, I keep using that word tactile. You're engaged with it here. It's do I want these both enabled? Do I want none? And I could turn the auto trader on and then selectively choose long or short based on the price action that I'm seeing within the footprint chart. And then if I have a particular preference here to certain setups, then I can enable those, and so such that if it sees it, it's going to fire the trade. And I don't have to go through that process and going, oh, okay, do I have everything I want here? I'm looking here. Do I have it? Software is going to identify it and take the trade for you immediately. A lot of horsepower here. It definitely takes some time to work with it and understand what it's doing, because it can be dangerous because because there's so many potential trigger points. You've got to be selective about when you enable it, and long or short. Takes some good amount of practice. So ideally, if someone is trialing this, you've got 7 days, 5 trading days. I'd encourage you to stay in sim until you really get comfortable with what you're doing over here, because again, it's like a loaded gun here. If you don't know what you're doing, you might shoot yourself in the foot. So approach slowly, and we'll continue to post videos with more detail about how you can work with these and some of the specifics of signals and signals, or working with some of these. I mean, you could do this. You could do all of that and say, okay, if any of those happen on any single bar, I want you to take a long. Right? I mean, that may be too much. But just so that you understand, you have that kind of horsepower. Okay, guys, more to come, but that should get you started, particularly if you're on a trial. Go slowly at first. Playback would be a good idea, just so you can get used to what you're seeing here and how you engage with it. Okay, we'll be back on soon.